Can you imagine buying your dream house to escape a brutal betrayal, only to realize you're not alone? I'm Jamaica. After my fiance stole my business and left me broken, I moved into a beautiful old Victorian for a fresh start. But every night, an angry old woman stood in my hallway, watching me sleep. I heard her footsteps, smelled her perfume, felt her rage closing in. Terrified and dismissed as crazy by the seller, I uncovered the horrifying truth. She was his murdered mother, and he'd sold me her prison. This is my true story of terror, secrets, and the most satisfying justice you'll ever hear. 10 chilling chapters. Stay till the end, you won't believe how it ends. Hit play, you're about to get hooked. Picture this, you're at the lowest point of your life. Everything you've worked for ripped away in one cruel betrayal, and all you want is a quiet place to disappear and heal. That's exactly where I was. My name is Jamaica. I was 31 when my world fell apart. I'd spent 8 years building a successful event planning business from nothing. Weddings, corporate galas, the kind of events people talked about for years. I poured my heart, my savings, every late night into it. My partner, my fiance, was right there with me the whole time. We were supposed to get married the following spring. Then I discovered he'd been embezzling money, sleeping with clients, and quietly transferring the business into his name alone. When I confronted him, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Jamaica, you were always better at the creative stuff. I handled the real business." My chest tightened so hard I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I clutched the evidence printouts. He didn't even apologize, just packed a bag and left me with the debts, the canceled contracts, and the humiliation of explaining to everyone why the wedding was off. The legal fight drained what little I had left. I lost the business, my reputation took a hit, and friends I'd known for years suddenly got busy. I felt disposable, used up, laughed at behind closed doors. So I sold everything I owned, loaded my SUV, and drove north until I found a listing that felt like a lifeline. A beautiful 1890s Victorian in a sleepy Vermont town, listed way below market. $140,000 for a 4-bedroom with original woodwork and a wraparound porch. Too good to be true? Maybe, but I was desperate for peace. The seller was an elderly man named Harold Whitcomb. He was in his late 70s, stooped shoulders, sharp gray eyes that sized me up like I was an inconvenience. We met on the wide front porch, autumn leaves swirling around our feet. "House has been in the family forever," he muttered, barely looking at me while handing over the keys. "Needs some love, but she's sturdy." His tone was entitled, impatient, like he couldn't wait to be rid of the place, and me. I asked why it was priced so low. He paused too long, then shrugged. "Getting too old for upkeep. Time to downsize." Something in his voice felt off, a flicker of discomfort he quickly buried under a forced smile. I pushed a little. "Any issues I should know about? Weird neighbors? History?" He chuckled, low and dismissive. "Old houses creak. That's all." He took my check, shook my hand too hard, and drove off without a backward glance. That first night, I was exhausted but hopeful. I unpacked essentials in the master bedroom upstairs. Big windows overlooking moonlit pines, a fireplace I couldn't wait to light. The house smelled of aged wood and faint dust. I fell into bed, thinking, this is my fresh start. No more betrayals, just quiet. Sleep came fast. Then, around 2:30 a.m., a cold settled over the room, heavy and unnatural. My eyes snapped open. Through the cracked bedroom door, down the long hallway lit only by a sliver of moonlight, stood a figure, an old woman, thin, white hair loose around her shoulders, wearing a faded floral nightgown. She didn't move, just stood there, watching. My heart slammed against my ribs, throat went bone dry. Hallucination, I told myself. Stress, exhaustion. But then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate shuffles across the hardwood, each one echoing like a heartbeat. Closer, closer. The air filled with a thick floral perfume, sweet and overpowering, like decades-old lavender left in a closed drawer. She stopped right outside my door. I could hear her breathing, ragged, angry. The rage coming off her was palpable, pressing down on my chest until I could barely draw air. I lunged for the light switch. The bulb flared on. Hallway empty, doors all closed, windows locked. But the perfume lingered, thick and cloying, and my skin prickled with the certainty I was still being watched. I searched every room, flashlight shaking in my hand, calling out, "Who's there?" Only silence answered. Back in bed, sheets pulled to my chin, body trembling, I whispered, "You're imagining it, Jamaica. Get a grip." But Harold's evasive eyes flashed in my mind, that too long pause when I'd asked about the house's history. Had he sold me more than just a home? Had he knowingly passed on some kind of curse? The injustice burned fresh all over again, betrayed by the man I loved, and now, it seemed, betrayed by this stranger who'd unloaded his secrets onto me like trash. Powerless in the dark, alone with whatever this was, the emotional damage sank deep. Unanswered questions clawed at me. Who was she? Why was she so angry? And why did it feel like she was never going to leave? The night dragged on, heavy and watchful. But the real nightmare? It was only just beginning. The days after that first night blurred into a haze of forced normalcy and growing dread. Mornings offered a brief escape. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, warming the dusty hardwood floors, making the house feel almost charming again. I'd brew coffee in the creaky kitchen, sit at the old oak table with my laptop, and try to rebuild my freelance event planning portfolio. Small gigs, birthday parties, virtual corporate meetings, anything to pay the mortgage and keep the lights on. I'd tell myself, it's just an old house settling, you're stressed, you're imagining things. But my hands would still tremble slightly as I typed, and I'd catch myself glancing over my shoulder every few minutes. As soon as the sun dipped below the pines, though, the atmosphere shifted. The house seemed to exhale, walls creaking louder, shadows stretching longer. The footsteps started earlier each night, soft at first, like someone testing the floorboards, then deliberate, pacing the hallway outside my bedroom. The floral perfume would drift in without warning, thick and nauseating, wrapping around me like invisible fingers. My chest would tighten immediately, breath coming shallow. I'd freeze at my desk, heart racing, waiting for her to appear. And she always did. By the end of the first week, the sightings were nightly. She'd stand at the end of the hallway, just beyond the pool of light from my bedside lamp, her thin frame silhouetted against the darkness, her eyes sunken, burning with a fury I couldn't understand, locked on me, watching me breathe, watching me pretend to sleep. One night I woke to find her closer, halfway down the hall, head tilted as if listening to my heartbeat. My throat closed up. I couldn't even scream. I just pulled the covers over my head like a child, body shaking, whispering, "This isn't real. This isn't happening." The emotional spiral was relentless. Shame flooded me during the day. How did you let yourself get here, Jamaica? Betrayed by the man you were going to marry, and now you're jumping at shadows in a house you can't even afford to leave? Disbelief warred with terror. Part of me still tried to rationalize it as stress, grief, maybe carbon monoxide poisoning. But the anger was growing too. Anger at my ex for destroying my life, anger at myself for trusting him, and now fresh anger at Harold for selling me this nightmare without a single honest word. I called him 10 days in. My voice cracked the moment he answered. "Harold, it's Jamaica, the new owner of the house. Something's wrong here, really wrong. I've been seeing things, hearing things, an old woman." He cut me off with a sharp laugh, cold and dismissive. "Seeing things? Girl, old houses make noises. Pipes, wind, animals in the walls. You're a city girl. You'll get used to it." "But it's not just noises," I pressed, gripping the phone tighter. "There's a presence, perfume, footsteps every night. I think the house might be haunted." Silence stretched on the line, thick and uncomfortable. Then he sighed, exaggerated, like I was wasting his precious time. "Haunted? That's ridiculous. My family lived there for generations, never saw a ghost. Sounds like buyer's remorse to me. If you're that scared, sell it, though good luck finding another fool to pay what you did." He paused, voice turning mocking. "Or maybe stop watching those ghost shows and get some sleep." Click. He hung up. I stood in the kitchen, phone still at my ear, tears burning my eyes. The condescension in his tone, the way he called me girl, dismissed my fear like I was hysterical, ignited something hot and bitter in my chest. He was doubling down, making me feel small, crazy, underestimated all over again, just like my ex had, just like everyone who'd sided with him during the breakup. That night, she came closer than ever. I was in bed, lights on, pretending to read, when the door creaked open by itself, slow, inch by inch. The perfume flooded the room, overwhelming. Footsteps crossed the threshold. She stood at the foot of my bed, face clearer now in the lamplight, deep wrinkles, thin lips pressed in a line of pure rage, eyes boring into mine. My entire body went rigid, breath trapped in my lungs. She didn't speak, but the accusation was deafening. "You don't belong here. Get out." I finally found my voice, a hoarse whisper. "What do you want from me?" She faded slowly, but the cold stayed. The perfume lingered for hours. Sleep became impossible. Dark circles deepened under my eyes. Freelance clients noticed. Emails asking if everything was okay when I missed deadlines. Friends texted, worried about my radio silence. I lied, just busy settling in. But isolation wrapped tighter. The house wasn't just haunted, it was consuming me. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic to distract myself, I found a box of old photographs tucked behind insulation. Dozens of them, family portraits from decades ago. And there she was, the woman, younger, standing stiffly beside a stern man and a small boy who looked unmistakably like a young Harold. On the back of one photo, faded ink, "Mother, Father, and Harold, 1968. My blood ran cold. Harold's mother. The resentment surged, hot and sharp. He knew, he absolutely knew, and he'd sold me his family's ghost like it was nothing. The wound wasn't healing, it was festering, turning fear into something darker. Rising, unstoppable. The breaking point was coming, I could feel it in my bones, and when it hit, everything would change.
Rock bottom doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It just creeps in quietly until one day you realize you're already there. By the end of the second month, the hauntings had stripped away every last layer of pretense I had left. Sleep was a distant memory, maybe 2 or 3 broken hours a night, always jolted awake by footsteps or that suffocating perfume. My reflection in the bathroom mirror was a stranger. Hollow cheeks, bruised shadows under my eyes, skin pale from avoiding daylight. Freelance work had completely dried up. Clients stopped responding to my apologetic emails about missed deadlines. One finally wrote back, "Jemica, we're going to have to move on. Best of luck." I stared at those words on my phone screen until they blurred, chest so tight it felt like my ribs were cracking inward. Disposable. Again. The house wasn't just haunted anymore, it was hostile. Objects moved when I wasn't looking, keys vanished from the kitchen counter and reappeared on the attic stairs. Doors slammed shut behind me with force that rattled the windows. One afternoon, while forcing myself to eat a sandwich at the table, every cabinet door in the kitchen flew open at once. Plates rattled. I dropped my food and ran outside, standing barefoot in the cold grass until my heart stopped trying to punch through my chest. Neighbors were starting to notice, curtains twitching when I left the house, polite smiles turning into concerned stares at the grocery store. I overheard 2 women at the post office. "That poor girl in the Whitcomb place looks like she hasn't slept in weeks." The worst insult came from Harold himself. I drove to his new condo in town, one of those sterile senior living places with fake plants in the lobby. I hadn't planned what I'd say, I just needed answers. He opened the door in a cardigan, coffee mug in hand, eyebrows raised like I was an annoying solicitor. "Harold," I started, voice already shaking. I can't live like this. Your mother, she's in the house every night. It's not imagination, it's real. You knew, didn't you? You knew and you sold it to me anyway. He looked me up and down, my unwashed hair, the dark circles, the desperate edge in my eyes, and his mouth twisted into something cruel, a slow, pitying smile. Jemica, sweetheart, he said, voice dripping with condescension. You look rough. Maybe you need professional help. Grief does strange things to people. Losing your business, your fiance, it's a lot. But ghosts? He chuckled, shaking his head. My mother died peacefully in her sleep 30 years ago. Natural causes. You're just fragile. City girls like you buy an old house and scare yourselves silly with creaks and drafts. Fragile. The word hit harder than a slap. My throat closed completely, hands balled into fists at my sides, nails digging crescents into my palms. I'm not fragile, I managed, barely above a whisper. I'm telling you the truth. She's angry, she's suffering, and she's making me suffer. He leaned against the doorframe, sipping his coffee, eyes cold. Then sell the house, though I doubt you'll get what you paid. Buyers don't like hysterical sellers. He paused, smirking. Or maybe stop drinking alone at night. Might help with the hallucinations. I stood there frozen, tears burning hot trails down my cheeks, while he watched, unmoved. He shut the door in my face without another word. I drove home in a fog, humiliation boiling into something darker. He'd taken my fear, my very real terror, and twisted it into proof that I was broken, weak, crazy, just like my ex had done when he called me too emotional to run a business, just like everyone who'd believed his lies over mine. That night, she delivered the final blow. I was in bed, lights blazing, every lamp in the room on, when the air turned ice cold. The perfume hit like a wall, stronger than ever, choking. Footsteps didn't just approach, they stormed, fast, furious. The bedroom door flew open so hard it banged against the wall. She was there, inside the room for the first time, standing inches from the foot of my bed. Her face was twisted in agony and rage, mouth open in a silent scream. Her hand reached out, skeletal fingers brushing my ankle under the blanket. The pain was immediate, burning cold shooting up my leg. Then came the visions, flashes, vivid and brutal. A younger Harold, drunk and shouting, shoving an older woman, his mother, down the attic stairs. Her body tumbling, neck snapping, him standing over her, panic turning to calculation, covering it up. Accidental fall, the coroner ruled. Inheritance secured. I jerked awake, or maybe I never slept, gasping, leg throbbing where she'd touched me. The room was empty again, but the message was clear. She wasn't haunting the house, she was trapped in it, and Harold had put her there. I curled on the floor, body racked with sobs, not just fear anymore, but grief for her, fury at him, and a bone-deep exhaustion from carrying everyone else's lies. I'd hit true rock bottom, terrified, isolated, dismissed as insane by the one person who knew the truth. But in that darkness, something shifted. The tears slowed, my breathing steadied. I stayed on the cold hardwood staring at the moonlit wall, and the internal monologue changed. No more running, no more begging for belief. He thinks I'm fragile. He thinks I'll break and disappear. He's wrong. I wiped my face, stood up on shaky legs, and whispered into the empty room. Not to her, but to myself. I see you now. I know what he did, and I'm not leaving until he pays for it. The decision crystallized, sharp and unbreakable. I was going to fight back. Not with screams or accusations he could dismiss, but with the truth, cold, patient, relentless. The hunted was about to become the hunter, and Harold Whitcomb, he had no idea what was coming.
Transformation doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just settles in, quiet and cold, like frost on a window pane. After that night on the floor,
The night her touch burned the truth into me, I stopped being the terrified woman Harold thought he'd sold a haunted house to. Outwardly, nothing changed much. I still kept the curtains drawn during the day, still moved through town like a ghost when I had to buy groceries. People whispered, but I let them. I stopped answering worried texts from old friends. I even let my hair grow wild and unwashed a little longer, playing the part of the fragile, broken city girl who'd cracked under small-town solitude. It was armor, the best kind. Inside the house, though, I became someone else entirely. I turned the dusty attic into my war room, cleared a space in the center, dragged up an old card table, and covered every inch of wall with what I found. Yellow newspaper clippings from library archives I'd printed at the town hall, birth and death records, property deeds going back a century, photos I'd carefully removed from that hidden box, timelines written in red marker connecting dates, names, lies. My hands didn't shake anymore when I taped up a new piece of evidence. They were steady, focused. The inner fire wasn't wild rage now. It was a controlled burn, precise and patient. Nights were for research. I'd wait until her footsteps started, always around 2 a.m., and instead of hiding under the covers, I'd sit up in bed with my laptop, headphones in, taking notes. The perfume no longer choked me. It signaled work time. Her presence became a strange ally. When she appeared at the door, watching, I'd meet her eyes and nod, just once. "I'm listening," that nod said. "I'm doing something about it." And slowly, incredibly, her anger seemed to ease, just a fraction. The footsteps grew softer, the cold less biting, like she understood I wasn't the enemy. I learned everything I could about Harold's mother. Her name was Eleanor Whitcomb, born 1925, married young to a strict man who died early, raised Harold alone after that. Town records painted her as quiet, devout, kept to herself, but neighbors' old interviews, buried in local history blogs, told a different story. Arguments echoing from the house in the 80s, Harold drinking heavily after losing jobs, Eleanor refusing to sign over the family property to fund his schemes. Then the accidental fall down the attic stairs in 1987. Death ruled natural, broken neck, no autopsy. Harold inherited everything the next week, sold off parcels over the years to cover debts, but kept the house until he unloaded it on me. Every new detail fueled the fire. I started observing Harold from a distance, not stalking, strategic. I'd drive past his condo complex on trash days, note when he left for appointments, sat in the back corner of the local diner where he had coffee every Tuesday, notebook hidden under a newspaper, listening to him brag to his old cronies about finally getting rid of that money pit. His voice carried that same entitled drawl. Some fool from the city paid asking price, didn't even haggle. Laughter from his friends. My jaw clenched, but I stayed silent, calm on the outside, recording every word in my head. One Saturday, he visited the cemetery. I followed at a distance, parked down the road, watched through binoculars from my car. He stood at Eleanor's grave, simple stone, overgrown with weeds, for exactly 4 minutes. No flowers. He muttered something I couldn't hear, face twisted, not in grief, but in irritation, kicked at the grass like it offended him, then spat on the ground and left. That was the moment I knew he felt no remorse, only annoyance that she was still, in some way, inconveniencing him. He called me once, a month after our confrontation. His number flashed on my phone when I was pinning up new property records. I let it ring twice, then answered with a tired, defeated voice, the expression he expected. "Jamaica," he said, smug satisfaction clear. "How's the house treating you? Still seeing ghosts?" I paused, let my breath hitch just enough. "It's hard, Harold. I don't sleep much." A low chuckle. "Told you. Old places have character. Maybe it's time to cut your losses. I know a realtor who could list it cheap, get you out fast." The condescension was thick, dripping. He thought he was winning, thought I was crumbling. I let the silence stretch, then whispered, "Maybe you're right. I can't do this anymore."
That's smart, girl. Knew you'd come around. He hung up, pleased with himself. I set the phone down slowly, a cold smile spreading across my face, the kind I hadn't felt since my ex destroyed everything. Let him think I was weak. Let him underestimate me. The contrast was everything. The fragile woman he saw versus the one building an unbreakable case in the attic, night after night, with Eleanor's silent approval watching from the shadows. I hired a private investigator with the last of my credit, quiet woman from Burlington who didn't ask too many questions. First report came back 2 weeks later, bank records showing large cash withdrawals from Harold right after Eleanor's death, a forged signature on an old will cutting out a cousin, hushed complaints from former caregivers about his temper. Every piece fit. Physically, I changed too. The sleepless nights turned purposeful. Morning runs through frozen woods until my lungs burned clean. Meals planned, not skipped. Strength returning, not just in body, but in resolve. Mirrors showed someone new, eyes sharp, jaw set, no longer shrinking from shadows. Harold saw none of it. Why would he? I was just the fragile city girl ready to run. But the first move was already in motion. Subtle, silent, irreversible. And when the trap finally snapped shut, he'd learn what it feels like to be the one haunted. The game had changed, and I was no longer playing defense.
The plan didn't come in a flash of anger. It built slowly, carefully, like laying bricks in the dark. One wrong placement and the whole wall could crumble. I knew screaming accusations at Harold wouldn't work. He'd already painted me as the hysterical woman seeing ghosts. No one in this small town would believe me over a lifelong resident like him, especially not without proof they couldn't ignore. So I stayed quiet, deadly quiet, and I started planting seeds that would grow into something he couldn't pull up by the roots. The first move was legal, but completely invisible. I set up a new email address under a fake name, something generic like Vermont History Concerned. From a library computer 2 towns over, I sent anonymous tips to the state police cold case unit. Not wild claims, just calm, factual questions. Recently purchased the old Whitcomb property on Maple Ridge Road, found documents suggesting Eleanor Whitcomb's 1987 death may not have been thoroughly investigated. Attaching scans of original coroner's report and property transfer records timed suspiciously close to the date of death. I included redacted copies of what I'd found in the attic, nothing that could trace back to me. My heart hammered as I hit send, fingers hovering over the trackpad, but I forced my breathing steady. This wasn't revenge yet, it was groundwork. Next came the social threads. I created a burner account on a local Facebook group, Vermont History and Genealogy Enthusiasts, posed as someone researching old family homes in the area, posted innocently, looking for stories about the Whitcomb house on Maple Ridge Road. Any old neighbors remember Eleanor or her son Harold? People love talking about the past, especially in small towns. Replies trickled in over days. An elderly woman. Eleanor was sweet, but kept to herself after her husband died. Harold was trouble, drinking, yelling late at night. A former mail carrier. Heard arguments the week before she passed. Sad accident, they said. Another. Harold changed after the inheritance, started spending fast. I saved every comment, every name, screenshotting before anyone could delete. The tension was electric. Every night while the footsteps paced softly outside my door, Eleanor's presence now almost protective, I'd sit at the attic table under a single lamp, compiling it all. The perfume would drift in gently, no longer choking. When I'd pause to rub my tired eyes, I'd feel her watching from the shadows, and I'd whisper, "We're getting there." The stakes were rising with every message sent. One slip, one recognizable phrase, and Harold could trace it back and sue me for harassment. But I was meticulous. Gloves on the keyboard, different locations, no patterns. Financially, I planted a smaller but sharper seed. Using public records, I filed a quiet title challenge at the county clerk's office, claiming non-disclosure of material defects in the property sale. I didn't mention ghosts outright. Instead, evidence of unresolved estate disputes and potential irregularities in chain of title following Eleanor Whitcomb's death. It forced Harold's name into official paperwork, required him to respond under oath, and quietly flagged the file for anyone searching the property history. His lawyer would have to build hours, money he'd bleed slowly. Then came the first hidden win. 3 weeks after my anonymous police tip, my PI forwarded me an email intercept. Nothing illegal, just public records alerts she monitored. The cold case unit had requested Eleanor's original file from archives. A detective had even driven out to interview a retired coroner who'd signed the report back in '87. The coroner, now in his 90s, apparently said on record, always thought it was odd, no autopsy for a fall like that, but the son was insistent it was accidental. That same week, Harold got a letter. I know because I watched from my car as he opened his mailbox at the condo complex, pulled out the envelope with the state police seal, and went pale right there on the sidewalk. He read it twice, hands trembling slightly. The first time I'd ever seen him unsteady. Then he crumpled it and stormed inside. I sat in my parked car a block away, engine off, breath fogging the window in the cold, and felt it. A small, sharp burst of satisfaction. Not full justice, not yet, but proof. The seeds were taking root. He called me that evening. I let it ring 4 times before answering, voice soft and weary, the broken woman he expected. "Jamaica?" he barked. No greeting. "You get any weird mail lately? Official stuff?" I paused, let confusion color my tone. "No? Why?" A frustrated huff. "Nothing, just watch what you say around town. People talk nonsense." He hung up fast. I set the phone down, looked into the dim hallway where Eleanor stood quietly watching, not angry anymore, but patient, waiting. I nodded to her. We're just getting started. Harold still had no idea I was the one pulling the strings. He probably blamed nosy historians or greedy relatives smelling money. Perfect. The subtle moves were working. Roots spreading underground, wrapping slowly around his comfortable little life. And the best part? He couldn't feel them tightening. Not yet. But soon, the ground would shift under his feet. And when it did, he'd finally know what it feels like to be the one who can't sleep at night. One careful seed at a time. The unraveling had begun. The first cracks in Harold's world were small. So small that most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did. I noticed everything now. It started with the questions. About a month after my anonymous tips hit the cold case unit, a plain, unmarked sedan parked outside Harold's condo for 2 hours one Tuesday morning. I knew because I'd taken to driving past on my grocery runs, slow rolls with sunglasses on, heart steady. 2 detectives in cheap suits knocked on his door. He answered in his robe, coffee mug in hand, face shifting from annoyance to something tighter when they showed their badges. The conversation lasted 20 minutes on his doorstep. He kept glancing up and down the street, voice rising once or twice before he forced it calm. When they left, he stood there a long moment, staring at the card one of them had handed him. Then he slammed the door hard enough to rattle the welcome wreath. That night, Eleanor didn't pace. She stood quietly at the end of my hallway, watching me work at the attic table. The perfume was faint, almost comforting, like approval. Harold's confusion turned to anger fast. My PI sent me audio from a discreet recorder she'd placed near his regular diner booth. Legal, public place. His voice was sharp, cutting through the clink of silverware. Some busybody's digging up old dirt, 30 damn years later. Probably that city girl I sold the house to thinks she's Nancy Drew 'cause the floorboards creak. His buddies chuckled uncomfortably. He didn't. If it's her, she'll regret it. I'll bury her in court costs. I listened to the clip 3 times in the dark, hands steady on my headphones. The threat should have scared me. Instead, it felt like fuel. His paranoia spread quickly. He started driving different routes home, changed his diner day from Tuesday to Thursday, installed a Ring camera at his front door. Too late, of course. I'd already seen what I needed. He called the real estate agent who'd handled our sale, ranting about liability for non-disclosure and demanding to know if I'd been asking questions. The agent, confused, said no. Harold didn't believe her.
He reached out to me one evening, text first, then a call I let go to voicemail. Text, "We need to talk about the house. Call me." Voicemail, "Hey Jemica, it's Harold. Listen, if you've been talking to anyone about my family, about my mother, stop it. Right now. You don't know what you're messing with. That house is mine by right, and I'll protect what's mine. Call me back." His voice cracked on the last line, just a hair, but enough. Fear hiding behind bluster. I didn't reply. Let him stew. The pressure built in layers. The cold case file was officially reopened, quietly noted in a state police bulletin my PI forwarded. A local reporter picked it up, ran a short piece in the weekly paper. Decades-old death investigation reopened in rural Vermont. No names yet, but anyone who knew the town connected the dots. People started looking at Harold differently at the grocery store. Conversations hushed when he walked into the diner. Old friends stopped inviting him to card night. His cruelty peaked one afternoon. My PI caught it on video. Harold at the cemetery again, drunk, in broad daylight, yelling at Eleanor's grave. You couldn't just die quietly, could you? Had to keep causing trouble. He kicked the headstone, actually kicked it, then staggered back to his car. The clip was short, grainy, but unmistakable. I watched it on loop one night, volume low, Eleanor's presence cool and calm beside me in the attic. He was unraveling, and I hadn't even spoken a word publicly. I stayed completely silent. No social media, no town gossip, no contact. Outwardly, I was still the reclusive, fragile woman he'd mocked, the one who jumped at shadows and probably cried herself to sleep. I let the town think I was falling apart, let Harold believe his threats had scared me into submission. Inside, I was ice. Every new sign of his stress felt like vindication. For every night Eleanor had terrified me, for every time he'd called me weak, fragile, hysterical, for selling me her prison like it was nothing. The stakes were skyrocketing now. If he ever proved I was behind the tips, the questions, the pressure, he could sue me for defamation, harassment, anything his lawyer could dream up. I had no money left for a defense. One wrong step, and I'd lose everything again. But the momentum was mine. Regulators digging, reporters circling, old neighbors remembering things they'd buried for decades. Harold was starting to feel what I'd felt for months, the slow, suffocating realization that control was slipping away, that someone, something was watching, waiting. He just didn't know it was me yet, or that Eleanor and we were only getting started. The pressure wasn't just building, it was closing in, and soon, very soon, it would crush him. I could almost hear the cracks spreading, like old floorboards under too much weight. Any day now, they'd give. The web wasn't just spinning anymore, it was tightening, thread by thread, until Harold could feel the pull, even if he didn't know where it was coming from. By early spring, multiple systems were closing in on him at once, each one fed by the quiet seeds I'd planted in the dark. The state police investigation went from reopened file to active interviews. Detectives visited old neighbors, the retired coroner, even a nurse who'd cared for Eleanor in her final months. My PI forwarded transcripts she'd obtained legally. Public records requests are beautiful things. The nurse remembered bruises on Eleanor's arms the week before the fall. She said she'd slipped, but her eyes told a different story. The coroner, sharper than his age suggested, admitted he'd felt pressured by Harold to rule it accidental without deeper examination. Young man was in a hurry to settle the estate. At the same time, the local paper ran a follow-up piece, this one with names. Questions linger in 1987 death of Eleanor Whitcomb, son Harold cooperating with police. The photo they used was an old one of Harold accepting a community award 20 years ago, looking smug in a suit. Comments online were brutal. Always thought he was shady. Money grabbed fast after she died. Poor Eleanor deserved better. The IRS joined the hunt next. One of the property parcels Harold sold shortly after inheriting had questionable tax filings, capital gains underreported, deductions that didn't add up. My anonymous tip to their whistleblower line, sent from a cafe Wi-Fi 3 towns over, included scanned deeds and bank deposit records showing large cash flows right after Eleanor's death. An audit letter arrived at his condo. My PI photographed him reading it in his car outside the post office, face ashen, hands gripping the steering wheel like he might snap it. Inside his little world, everything fractured. His condo association sent a noise complaint after neighbors overheard him screaming on the phone late at night. "This is harassment. I'll sue every one of you." The diner stopped saving his usual booth. Conversations died when he walked in. Old friends crossed the street to avoid him. One even told my PI, "Harold's always been tight with a dollar, but this feels different. Guilty, maybe." His paranoia hit fever pitch. He hired his own private investigator, some discount guy from Burlington, who spent days staking out my house, convinced I was the source. I let him see exactly what I wanted, me shuffling to the mailbox in pajamas, looking exhausted and defeated, barely leaving the property. The report came back to Harold. Subject appears depressed and withdrawn. No evidence of external contacts or activity related to inquiries. Harold paid the bill, but the relief was temporary. He showed up at my door once, late afternoon, unannounced. I watched him pull into the driveway on my phone's security cam before answering. He looked older, stooped more, hair unkempt, eyes red-shot. I opened the door just a crack, chain still on. "Jamaica," he said, voice rough, trying for calm but failing. "We need to talk, off the record." I didn't move. "About what?" He glanced over his shoulder like someone might be listening. "This nonsense. Police, reporters. It's gotta stop. Whatever you think you know." "I don't know anything," I cut in, voice soft, tired. The perfect broken woman. "I barely leave the house, Harold. You were right. It's too much for me." His eyes searched my face, desperate for a lie he could grab onto. He didn't find one. "Then help me make it stop," he pleaded, arrogance cracking. "Tell people you never saw anything strange, that you're happy here." I let the silence stretch, cold and heavy. "I'm not happy," I said finally, "but it's not my story to tell." I closed the door gently. He stood on the porch a long time before leaving. That night, Eleanor didn't appear at all. The house was quiet, peaceful, for the first time since I'd moved in. I sat in the attic under the single lamp, surrounded by my wall of evidence, and let myself reflect on the terror of those first nights, waking to her rage, feeling hunted in my own home, on Harold's smirks, his dismissals, his cruelty in calling me fragile while knowing exactly what he'd trapped me with, on Eleanor, trapped for decades, unable to rest because the man who stole her life walked free. The pain still lived in my chest, sharp and familiar, but it wasn't destroying me anymore. It was guiding me. The emotional payoff was brewing now, slow, warm, inevitable. Not full release yet, but close enough to taste. Everything was converging. A court date loomed for my title challenge, forcing Harold to testify under oath about the sale and Eleanor's death. The police had scheduled a formal interview with new forensic options. Exhumation wasn't off the table. The town had turned its back. His health was slipping. My PI reported missed doctor appointments rescheduled, shaking hands, sleepless nights. Imminent collapse hung in the air like storm clouds. Harold's empire, built on lies, inheritance, and a mother's silenced scream, was teetering. One good push, and it would all come down. I whispered to the empty attic, voice steady and sure. "We're almost there, Eleanor." The house creaked softly in response, not in warning, but in agreement. The trap wasn't just tightening, it was ready to snap. And when it did, Harold Whitcomb would finally face the ghost he'd created, not in the dark, but in the harsh light of day, where everyone would see.
The truth didn't creep out, it exploded. I was in the kitchen making tea, simple things felt grounding now, when my phone buzzed with a news alert I'd set months ago. The headline stopped me cold. Vermont man charged in connection with 1987 death of mother. Decades-old cold case cracked.
My hands went numb. The mug slipped, shattering on the tile floor. Hot liquid splashed my feet, but I barely felt it. I sank to my knees, scrolling frantically. It was everywhere. The local paper had the full story front page. Statewide outlets picked it up within hours. By evening, it was national. Son arrested for murder after anonymous tips revive 38-year-old case. They named Harold Whitcomb. They had his mugshot, gray hair, disheveled, eyes wide and bloodshot, the smugness gone. They detailed the exhumation order granted last week, the new forensic report showing trauma inconsistent with a simple fall. The witnesses finally coming forward about the arguments, the bruises, the rushed inheritance. Reporters swarmed his condo by noon. I watched the live stream from my laptop in the attic, volume low. Dozens of them outside the building, cameras flashing, as Harold tried to leave for the police station. He pushed through in a rumpled coat, head down, no jacket despite the chill. Microphones thrust in his face. "Mr. Whitcomb, did you kill your mother for the inheritance? Why the forged will? Any comment on the anonymous evidence?" He snarled, no comment, once, voice cracking. Then a detective guided him into a cruiser. The door slammed, the crowd erupted. His image didn't just crack, it shattered. Social media lit up. Old yearbook photos of him surfaced next to the mugshot. The town Facebook group, where I'd planted those first innocent questions, filled with outrage. I always knew he was off. Poor Eleanor, trapped all these years. He sold that house knowing it was cursed by what he did. Someone even posted a recent photo of me leaving the grocery store, pale, withdrawn, and captioned it, "The buyer who uncovered the truth." Comments poured sympathy my way for the first time. Harold lost control completely. From jail, denied bail due to flight risk concerns, he made calls my PI intercepted snippets of. To his lawyer, "Find out who tipped them. It's that woman, I know it is." Voice desperate, pleading. To an old friend, "You gotta speak up for me. Tell them I'm no killer." The friend mumbled excuses and hung up. Even his condo association voted to review his residency. Noise complaints, disturbances, bringing disrepute. The town turned its back overnight. The diner banned him from the premises if he ever got out. His name scratched off the Veterans Memorial plaque he'd bragged about funding. Church members, where he'd played the pious son for decades, removed him from the prayer list. I remained completely composed. No statements to reporters who started knocking on my door, no victory posts. I just watched from the window as news vans parked down the road, then left when I didn't answer. Inside, I cleaned up the broken mug, made new tea, and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook. Calm, steady. The woman Harold had called fragile was now the one thing standing untouched while his world burned. That night, the house was silent. No footsteps, no perfume, no cold spots. Eleanor didn't appear. For the first time since I'd moved in, the hallway stayed empty. I walked its length slowly, hand trailing the wallpaper, feeling the absence like a held breath. She was waiting. We both were. The anticipation was at its peak, electric, humming under my skin. Everything I'd built in silence was now screaming in the light. Harold's facade wasn't fractured anymore. It was gone. And the final reckoning? It was coming. Fast. In a courtroom where lies wouldn't save him, where the ghost he'd buried would finally speak. Through me. Through the truth. And when that day came, he'd face her at last. Not in the dark, but in front of everyone. The exposure was complete. But the justice? That was next. And it would be glorious.
The courtroom was smaller than I expected, but it felt enormous under the weight of what was about to happen. It was a gray October morning when the trial began. Murder in the second degree, with aggravating circumstances for financial motive. The old county courthouse smelled of polished wood and tension. Reporters filled the back rows, notebooks ready. Townspeople packed the benches, whispering as Harold was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, looking 20 years older than when he'd smirked on my porch. His eyes scanned the room frantically, landing on me in the front row. For the first time, there was no arrogance, just shock and fear. I met his gaze and didn't look away. The prosecution laid it out methodically over 3 days.
The new forensic evidence from the exhumation, fractures inconsistent with a simple fall, defensive wounds on Eleanor's arms, trauma to the back of the skull suggesting a push. The forged codicil to her will, cutting out a cousin and funneling everything to Harold, handwriting analysis matching his own disguised scrawl. Bank records showing massive cash withdrawals days after her death. Witnesses, neighbors, the nurse, even a former bartender who remembered Harold bragging the night Eleanor died. Finally free of the old bat. House is mine now. Then came my testimony. I walked to the stand calmly, swore in, and sat. The prosecutor was gentle but precise. Miss Jamaica Reed, you purchased the Whitcomb property from the defendant in 2024. Can you describe what led you to investigate Eleanor Whitcomb's death? I took a slow breath. The room was silent except for the scratch of pens. I didn't move there to investigate anything. I moved there to escape my own betrayal. But the house, it wouldn't let me rest. Eleanor was there, every night, angry, trapped. At first, I thought I was losing my mind, but the more I felt her pain, the more I started looking for answers, and everything pointed to him. I told them about the hidden photos, the suspicious sale price, Harold's dismissive cruelty when I confronted him, the anonymous tips I'd sent, not out of vengeance at first, but desperation for peace. Harold's lawyer tried to tear me apart on cross. Isn't it true you were emotionally unstable after a business collapse and breakup, that you imagined a haunting to cope with your failures? I looked directly at Harold as I answered. No, I was betrayed once. I know what it feels like to be dismissed, called fragile, treated like I didn't matter. But Eleanor wasn't imagination. She was real, and she deserved justice. The jury leaned forward. Then came the final piece. The prosecution introduced a recording, legally obtained from Harold's own phone, seized during arrest. A voicemail he'd left his lawyer the night before trial. If that bitch testifies, we're done. She knows too much. Maybe we can still scare her into silence. The courtroom gasped. Harold's face drained of color. He half stood, shouting, "That's taken out of context. She's lying. All of you are lying. I didn't mean I loved my mother." The judge banged the gavel. "Order, Mr. Whitcomb, sit down." But Harold couldn't stop. He turned to me, eyes wild, pointing with a cuffed hand. You did this. You and your ghost stories. I should have never sold you that house. You ruined me. You ruined everything." His lawyer tried to pull him down, whispering frantically. Bailiffs moved in. Harold fought them, voice breaking into something raw and terrified. "She's not even real. She can't hurt me. She can't—" He collapsed into his chair mid-sentence, sobbing openly, shoulders heaving. The entitled, cruel man who'd mocked my fear, who'd called me weak and hysterical, was gone. In his place was a broken old man, humiliated in front of the town he'd lorded over for decades. The power didn't just reverse, it obliterated him. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Harold didn't react at first, just stared at the table, mouth open. Then he looked up at me again. Our eyes locked across the room. Same moment we'd shared the day he handed me the keys. Only now, the smirk was mine. Subtle, calm, unbreakable. Something shifted in the air. A chill brushed my skin. Familiar, floral, gentle. I glanced to the side, towards the empty corner near the jury box. She was there. Eleanor. Not angry, not raging. She stood in a soft glow, face peaceful for the first time. Younger somehow, freed. Her eyes, those dark, furious eyes, met mine. She nodded once slowly, gratefully. Then she faded, not into shadow, into light, gone. The emotional release hit me like a wave. My throat tightened, tears welled, hot and sudden. Not from pain this time, from relief, from justice finally served, not just for me, but for her, for every night she'd haunted me, every tear I'd cried in terror, every time Harold had dismissed us both as weak, hysterical women. It was over. He was led away in cuffs, head down, reporters shouting questions he'd never answer with anything but silence now. I walked out of the courthouse into crisp autumn air, cameras flashing, but I didn't speak, didn't need to. The revenge wasn't in his tears or his screams. It was in that final moment, knowing he finally understood what powerless felt like, what it felt like to be haunted by the truth, what it felt like to lose everything to someone he'd underestimated. It was earned, justified, complete. And as I drove back to the house, my house, truly mine now, quiet and waiting, I felt her absence like a gift. The nightmare was over, but the peace, that was just beginning.
The house felt different the morning after the verdict. I woke up to sunlight pouring through the bedroom windows. No cold spots, no lingering perfume, no creaks that sounded like footsteps. Just quiet. Real quiet. The kind I'd been chasing since the day I signed those papers. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the familiar dread to creep in. It didn't. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't bracing for her appearance. Eleanor was gone, truly gone, freed by the truth spoken aloud in that courtroom. Harold's consequences settled fast and heavy. Sentencing came 3 months later, 25 years to life, no parole for 15. The judge called it a calculated betrayal of the deepest trust, a mother's life taken for greed. Harold didn't speak, just stared at the floor while the gavel fell. His condo was seized to cover restitution and legal fees. What little he had left went to distant cousins who'd come forward after the forged will was exposed. He died in prison 2 years later. Heart attack, they said, alone in his cell. No visitors. The town barely noted it in the paper, a small obituary mentioning predeceased by his mother, Eleanor. I kept the house, not out of sentiment, but because it was mine now, in every way. I renovated slowly, on my own terms, new paint, restored woodwork, modern lighting that chased away every shadow. The attic war room became a sunny office where I rebuilt my event planning business, bigger this time, smarter, with partners I vetted carefully and contracts I read twice. Clients came back. New ones found me through word of mouth. Jamaica Reed, the one who solved that old murder case, she's incredible and tough as hell. I never corrected the rumors that I'd been some kind of amateur detective. Let them think what they wanted. The truth was quieter. I'd just refused to stay silent. The growth wasn't dramatic. It was steady. Therapy helped unpack the layers. My ex's betrayal, the terror of those haunted nights, the rage I'd carried like armor. I learned to trust again, slowly. Made real friends in town, the kind who showed up with casseroles after the trial, not whispers. Dated a little, laughed more, ran every morning through the woods behind the house, feeling the ground solid under my feet. Some nights, I still light a candle on the fireplace mantel, not for fear, but for her, Eleanor. A silent thank you. She'd chosen me, in her desperation, to carry her story when no one else would listen. I'd been the vessel for her justice, and in return, she'd forced me to find my own strength. I think about karma often now, not in some mystical way, but real. Harold thought he could bury his crime, literally push it down the stairs and walk away rich. He thought women like his mother, like me, were disposable, weak, easy to silence. He was wrong. Justice isn't always instant. Sometimes it waits decades. Sometimes it moves into your old house, terrified and broke, and refuses to leave until the truth is told. Self-worth isn't what others give you. It's what you reclaim when they try to take it. I reclaimed mine in that courtroom, watching him crumble. I reclaimed it every day after, building a life that was truly mine. So if you're listening to this and you've been betrayed,
by family, by someone who was supposed to protect you, by someone who sold you their darkness disguised as a dream, know this: they can haunt you for a while. They can make you doubt everything, but they don't get the final say. You do. The quiet ones, the ones they underestimate, dismiss, call fragile, we're the ones who carry the truth longest. And when we finally speak it, the ghosts rest, the liars fall, and we rise, stronger, freer, whole. Thank you for walking this story with me. If it helps even one of you find your voice in the dark, then every sleepless night, every tear, every moment I felt powerless was worth it. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, some houses aren't haunted by ghosts. They're haunted by secrets. And secrets, they always find their way into the light. Eventually.